Welcome back to the deep dive. I want you to picture something for a second. It's a rainy Tuesday evening. You're sitting in your living room. You're worried about the electric bill. You're thinking about your commute tomorrow. You are, by all accounts, living a completely ordinary, safe, perhaps even, slightly boring life. And then there is a knock at the door.
Or a letter slides through the mail slot with an offer that seems just a little too good to be true.
Exactly. And in that split second, your entire reality fractures. You aren't just a clerk or a widow anymore. You are suddenly the protagonist in a thriller. That is the question we are wrestling with today. What happens when adventure or, absolute terror knocks on the door of the unsuspecting ordinary person?
It is a classic literary friction, isn't it? The collision between the mundane and the extraordinary. We are so used to mysteries being the domain of, well, the professionals.
Right, the Sherlocks, the Poirots.
The people who seek out crime. But there is something infinitely more compelling and frankly more relatable about the everyman or every woman who just stumbles into a situation they are woefully ill-equipped to handle.
And to explore this, we are unpacking a collection that I think is criminally underrated. We are diving deep into Agatha Christie's short story collection, The Listerdale Mystery.
It is a fascinating collection to analyze. It's published around 1934, which is a critical time. I mean, you've got the world between wars, the Great Depression is casting this long shadow, and society is in flux.
Yeah.
And this book, well, it's a distinct departure from her heavy hitters. You won't find Hercule Poirot meticulously grooming his mustache hair.
And Miss Marple isn't knitting in the corner observing village life.
Not at all.
Which is actually incredibly refreshing. It feels like Christie is, letting her hair down or perhaps experimenting with different flavors of storytelling.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. We have a stack of stories here that range from, like, fluffy, high society rom-coms that feel almost like P.G. Wodehouse, all the way to some of the darkest, most psychological horror she ever wrote. It is a total mixed bag. You get lighthearted romance, high-stakes espionage, and then chilling, cold-blooded murder.
So our mission today is to unpack how Christie uses that ordinary person trope to explore themes that are actually quite deep when you scratch the surface.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about identity, the rigidity of social class, the crushing weight of economic anxiety.
And that razor-thin line between a lucky break and a fatal mistake.
Exactly.
I have to say, I went into this expecting the usual murder puzzles, but I stayed for the romance. Some of these are surprisingly sweet, but then you have the others.
Right. And I am here to be the bearer of bad news and remind you that in at least two of these stories, what looks like romance is actually a trapdoor dropping you straight into a nightmare.
Okay.
We are absolutely going to look at the psychological underpinnings of stories like Philomel Cottage and Accident, which are, in my professional opinion, some of the most terrifying short fiction of the 20th century.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start with the title story, The Listerdale Mystery. This one feels like a fairy tale designed specifically for anyone who has ever lost sleep over paying rent.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
I would classify this story as a social fantasy. To really get it, we have to look at the protagonist, Mrs. St. Vincent. She represents a very specific demographic of the 1930s, the impoverished gentlewoman.
I love that phrase, genteel poverty. It just paints such a vivid picture, doesn't it? You have Mrs. St. Vincent and her two adult children, Barbara and Rupert. And Mrs. St. Vincent is clearly upper class in her manners, her background, her expectations.
But the bank account?
Empty.
Completely empty. She's adding up the butcher's bill and getting headaches because the math simply doesn't work. They are living in what Christie describes as dingy, furnished lodgings. You can almost smell the dust and, the cabbage in the hallway.
And the daughter, Barbara, is not taking it well at all. She's bitter.
Barbara is the voice of resentment. She's been to Egypt with a wealthy cousin, so she's tasted the high life, the parties, the clothes, the servants, and now she's back in the grime.
And she hates it.
She says quite explicitly, "I'm sick of being hard up." It's a very grounded, very human motivation. She feels like she's been cheated out of her birthright.
So, we have this pressure cooker of financial stress, and then the catalyst arrives. Mrs. St. Vincent is reading the Morning Post, which, by the way, tells you everything you need to know about her social standing.
That's the aristocrat's paper.
Right, exactly. And she sees an advertisement. To gentle people only. Small house in Westminster. Rent purely nominal.
Nominal rent, the two most beautiful words in the English language, and also the two most suspicious. Westminster is a high-end district.
Right.
Finding a cheap house there is like finding a penthouse in Manhattan for $500 a month. It just doesn't happen.
If I saw that today, I'd assume it was a scam, or the house was built on a radioactive waste dump or something. But Mrs. St. Vincent is desperate. She goes to the agents, finds out the rent is practically nothing, and decides to check it out. And the house... Well, describe the house for us.
Oh, number 7, Chevillo Place. It's described as a gem. It's Queen Anne style, which implies this classic, elegant architecture. It has impeccable furniture, fresh flowers in the vases. And here's the crucial part. A full staff of servants is included in that nominal rent.
Included. That is the ultimate fantasy. And this is where we meet Quentin, the butler.
Quentin is a fantastic character. He is described as having the meditative calm of an archbishop. He runs the show. He interviews Mrs. St. Vincent almost as if he's the landlord.
Right.
He tells her the owner, Lord Listerdale, just wants the house cared for by the right sort of people.
It's snobbery used as a marketing tactic. We don't want your money, we want your class.
Precisely.
But the son, Rupert, isn't buying it for a second. Rupert is young, he works in the city, and he reads far too many detective novels. He is immediately suspicious.
Rupert represents the cynical modern reader, doesn't he? He knows Lord Listerdale supposedly disappeared to East Africa under mysterious circumstances. He looks at this perfect house, this too-good-to-be-true butler, and he does the detective math.
So his conclusion is...
What? He deduces that the real Lord Listerdale was murdered by the butler, Quentin.
And his theory is that Quentin is hiding the body behind the wood paneling and renting the house out to keep up appearances.
Exactly. It's a very logical deduction if you think you're in a murder mystery. Rupert is convinced he's living in a crime thriller.
But his mother?
Mrs. St. Vincent, however, thinks she's in a romance novel. She loves the house. She feels safe there. She even starts thinking the butler is a kind of benevolent magician who makes all her troubles just vanish.
So Rupert decides to play detective. He wants to save his mother from this murderer.
He does. He tracks down the real Quentin, or at least the man he thinks is the real Quentin, who's living in a cottage near Listerdale's country estate. And he finds out the man at the London house is an imposter.
So he thinks he's cracked it.
He's sure of it. And here is the twist. Rupert drags this real Quentin to the London house to confront the imposter. He thinks he's about to have this huge, dramatic Scooby-Doo unmasking.
Police! Arrest this man!
Right. But instead, the imposter butler reveals himself with total dignity.
It's Lord Listerdale himself. The butler is the lord.
Exactly. The man soothing the tea is the owner of the entire estate.
Okay, this is where I need you to explain the psychology here. Why on earth is a wealthy lord pretending to be his own butler and renting his house out for pennies? It seems like an awful lot of work.
This is where that social fantasy concept really lands. Listerdale explains that he looked at his life and he realized he was a selfish, lonely old man. He wanted to help a very specific class of people, the people like Mrs. St. Vincent, who were too proud to ask for charity.
The class that cannot beg?
That's the phrase he uses. So he decided to go undercover.
To disappear?
Yes. He decided to vanish, pretend to go to Africa, and instead serve these people as a butler. He wanted to ensure they were treated like royalty, to give them back their dignity. He's basically an undercover billionaire philanthropist.
But instead of writing checks, he's polishing silver.
Exactly.
It's completely bonkers, but it's undeniably charming. And notice the resolution. It's not a police arrest. It's a marriage proposal.
It is. Lord Listerdale, who has fallen in love with Mrs. St. Vincent's grace and spirit, proposes to her.
And it's the ultimate solution to economic anxiety for that era. The solution wasn't Mrs. St. Vincent gets a job and leans in. The solution was a benevolent aristocrat swoops in, serves you dinner, and then marries you.
It tells us so much about the anxieties of the time. The systems were failing for people like the St. Vincents. They didn't trust the economy. They didn't trust the new money. They wanted a return to a kind of feudal benevolence.
They wanted the lord of the manor to take care of them.
Precisely. It's a comforting fantasy. But Agatha Christie, being Agatha Christie, she doesn't let us stay comfortable for long. If the Listerdale Mystery is a daydream, the next story we need to discuss is a straight-up nightmare.
Oh, yes.
We need to talk about Philomel Cottage.
Oh, this one. I read this with all the lights on. It's widely considered one of the best short stories she ever wrote, isn't it?
It is often ranked in her top 5. And it shifts gears completely from that social fantasy to the psychological thriller.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We meet Alex Martin. She's not an aristocrat. She's a working woman. She's 33. She's been a shorthand typist for 15 years, supporting an invalid mother.
Right. She's tough. She's practical. She knows the value of $1. But then her circumstances change. Her mother passes away, and she inherits a little bit of money, just enough to be independent.
And that independence, paradoxically, makes her vulnerable.
It does. She meets Gerald Martin. He's charming, intense, passionate. He's everything her life hasn't been.
And she falls hard. She knows him for 1 week before they get married. 1 week.
It's the classic whirlwind romance. And to do this, she ditches her old friend, Dick Windyford. Now, Dick is the safe choice. He clearly loved her, but he was poor and too proud to propose until he had money. Alex chooses the excitement of Gerald over the safety of Dick.
They move to this isolated, picturesque house called Philomel Cottage. It sounds lovely, but you're going to tell me the name means something terrible, aren't you?
I am. In Greek mythology, Philomela was a woman who was brutally raped by her brother-in-law, who then cut out her tongue so she couldn't tell anyone.
Oh.
She was eventually transformed into a nightingale. So the name suggests a setting for tragedy, for silence, and for violence against women.
That sets a grim tone, and the tension starts almost immediately inside the house. Alex starts having these recurring dreams.
This is a fascinating narrative device. Alex dreams that her husband is dead, and Dick Windyford is standing over him. But the horror isn't that her husband is dead. The horror is that in the dream, she is glad. She is grateful. She thanks Dick.
It's her subconscious screaming at her, "Get out! You made a mistake!"
Exactly. It is intuition battling against conscious logic. Logic says, I am happy, I am married, I have money. Instinct says, I am sleeping next to a predator.
And the clues start piling up in the waking world, too. Gerald is secretive. He hates visitors. He wants them to be totally isolated.
And then there's the incident with the gardener, George.
Right.
George is the unwitting catalyst. He mentions to Alex that Gerald told him they were going to London the next day. But Gerald never told Alex that. When she confronts him, he gets furiously angry, disproportionately angry at the gardener.
That's the first real crack in the mask. Then Alex finds the pocket diary. This is such a classic detective clue. She finds Gerald's diary dropped in the garden. It has their marriage date, but for that very night at 9 o'clock, it just says 9 p.m., nothing else.
It's chilling in its administrative coldness. A specific time for an unspecified event. It's like seeing a deadline on a calendar, but you don't know what to do.
So, driven by this mounting dread, Alex does something that marks the point of no return. She picks the lock of her husband's private drawer.
She breaks the trust of the marriage to find the truth.
And she finds newspaper clippings.
Clippings about a man named Charles Lemaitre, a notorious bigamist and murderer. He marries women for their money, insures them or takes their capital, and then accidents happen.
Oh, no.
A skeleton was found under the floor of one of his houses.
Alex looks at the photo of Lemaitre. It looks like Gerald, but photos can be grainy. But then she reads the description. It mentions a mole on his left wrist.
And Alex knows Gerald has that mole. She's seen it.
The realization scene is just masterful. She realizes she is trapped, she's alone, the house is miles from the village, the telephone is in the hall, but Gerald is watching her.
And she looks out the window and sees him digging in the garden.
And he's not planting tulips.
He is digging a grave.
And she realizes that 9 p.m. entry in the diary isn't a dinner reservation, it's the time scheduled for her murder, in the cellar.
This is where the story gets really interesting. In a typical story of this era, the hero, Dick Windyford, would bust in right now. He'd break down the door and save her.
But Dick isn't there.
Dick isn't there. Alex has to save herself.
So she uses the only weapon she has, her mind. She realizes something about Gerald's psychology.
She realizes that Gerald Lemaitre is a narcissist. He prides himself on his crimes. But, like many criminals, he is also superstitious and deeply paranoid. So she decides to outplay him. She creates a new persona.
She sits him down and tells him a story. She confesses.
I love this twist.
It's brilliant. She tells him she is a murderer. She invents this whole backstory that she killed 2 previous husbands with poison, specifically hyoscine.
Hyoscine is a real poison used in that era. It affects the heart and nervous system. And crucially, she tells him it leaves no trace.
And then she delivers the line, "I've already put it in your coffee."
It's a brilliant inversion. She targets his paranoia. A man who kills for a living is naturally terrified of being killed. He starts to panic. He thinks he's dying. The physical symptoms he feels, the racing heart, the dry mouth, are psychosomatic.
They're induced by pure terror.
Exactly. It's a nocebo effect. If you believe you are poisoned, your body can react as if you are.
She literally scares him to death, or at least into a state of total shock.
She does. He collapses. By the time Dick Windyford finally arrives, because Alex did manage to make a coded phone call earlier, pretending to call the butcher, Gerald is dead. His heart gave out from the shock.
And her final line, she's quoting her own fake story. And presently, he died.
It is absolutely chilling. In the Listerdale Mystery, the heroine is saved by a lord. In Philomel Cottage, the heroine has to tap into her own darkness, her own ability to deceive in order to survive.
It suggests that to defeat a monster, you have to become a bit of a monster yourself.
It really does.
That is dark, but incredibly effective. It really challenges the idea of the helpless female victim. Okay, let's shake off the horror for a moment and jump onto a train.
Good idea.
We have two stories here that deal with identity swaps and high adventure. The Girl on the Train and Jane in Search of a Job.
These stories fit into what we call the Ruritanian subgenre. In the 1920s and 30s, there was this huge public fascination with displaced royalty from fictional Eastern European kingdoms.
Right, because of the Russian Revolution and the fall of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Exactly. Europe was full of exiles. You had stories of grand duchesses driving taxis, counts working as waiters. It created this idea that royalty was hiding in plain sight.
And in The Girl on the Train, we meet George Roland. He's a wealthy young man, a bit of a Bertie Wooster type.
Totally.
He's been disowned by his uncle for being a slacker. He gets on a train, and suddenly a girl jumps into his carriage and begs him to hide her.
It's the classic Hitchcock setup thing. The 39 steps.
Yeah.
The innocent man swept into international intrigue.
And he hides her under the seat.
He does, which is hilarious. He covers her with a suitcase or a rug. An angry foreign man with a beard comes looking for her, and George bluffs him away.
Then the girl gives him a mysterious package to guard and disappears.
The package, the foreign spies, the chase to Portsmouth, it's a romp. But what's interesting is the identity play. George thinks he's involved in state secrets. He thinks he's saving a kingdom.
But the package just contains a wedding ring.
Exactly. The girl, Elizabeth, turns out to be a grand duchess escaping an arranged marriage so she can marry George's own cousin. But the twist is, George doesn't end up with nothing. He ends up marrying Elizabeth's sister.
It's pure escapism. It says, get on a train and you might marry a princess. But Jane, in Search of a Job, takes that Grand Duchess theme and grounds it in the economic reality of the time again.
Yes. Jane Cleveland isn't a rich playboy. She is broke. She needs a job desperately. She answers an ad for a woman of a specific height, coloring, and French-speaking ability.
It's like a casting call. She goes to this queue of women, and because she's the perfect physical match, she gets hired, her job, to double for the Grand Duchess Pauline of Ostrova.
The Grand Duchess is worried about assassination attempts, so she needs a decoy for public events. And Jane thinks, great, easy money, a bit of danger, I'm in. She steps into the fantasy.
And she does it. She puts on the dress, she opens a bazaar, accepts bouquets, waves to the crowd. She loves it. She feels special.
Of course.
But then on the drive back, things go wrong.
The car is hijacked. Jane is taken to an empty house and drugged. When she wakes up, she's not wearing the Grand Duchess's clothes anymore. She's wearing a cheap red dress.
And she finds a newspaper that says, the girl bandit in the red dress held up the bazaar and stole a pearl necklace.
She's been framed.
Completely.
The Grand Duchess and her entourage were actually a gang of thieves. They used Jane to establish an alibi for the real Duchess, who was the thief in the red dress, while Jane is left holding the bag as the red dress bandit.
It's a brilliant con. They exploited Jane's poverty and her willingness to believe in the fairy tale. You know, oh, of course a Grand Duchess needs my help.
Exactly. Both these stories play on the idea that in the interwar period, identity was fluid. You could get on a train as a clerk and get off as a conspirator. You could answer an ad and become royalty. It speaks to a deep desire to escape the mundane self.
But Christie warns us, sometimes that desire makes you a mark.
A perfect mark.
Speaking of escaping the mundane self, let's talk about cars. We have two stories where the automobile is basically the main character. The Manhood of Edward Robinson and A Fruitful Sunday.
We have to remember that in the 1920s and 30s, the car was such a potent symbol. It wasn't just transport. It was freedom. It was power. It was sex appeal.
In The Manhood of Edward Robinson, Edward is a clerk. He's engaged to Maud. And Maud is, well, she's a joy killer.
Maud is the embodiment of prudence. She completely dominates him. She wants him to invest his money, save for a rainy day, buy a practical house in the suburbs.
But Edward wins £500 in a competition, which is a life-changing amount of money back then.
Huge.
And instead of being sensible, he goes rogue. He buys a car, a scarlet two-seater.
The color is so important.
Yeah.
Scarlet. It's aggressive. It's passionate. This is his rebellion. The car represents everything Maud hates: speed, waste, excitement. He goes for a drive on Christmas Eve, and he feels like a king.
But the escapism gets literal. He parks the car, goes for a walk, and when he comes back, he finds a diamond necklace in the pocket of the car.
He's taken the wrong car. It's the same model, same scarlet color, but it's not his.
And this leads him to Lady Noreen. She's a bright young thing, a wealthy socialite doing a scavenger hunt, which involves stealing a necklace. And she mistakes Edward for her friend Gerald.
And Edward just rolls with it. This is the best part. He doesn't correct her. He puts on a tuxedo, he goes to a nightclub with her, he dances, he drinks cocktails. He becomes the he-man he reads about in his adventure novels.
He steps into an alternate reality where he is dashing and confident. And the crucial thing is, he succeeds. He plays the part perfectly. Lady Noreen even kisses him.
But the ending is the kicker. He goes back to Maud. He returns to his ordinary life.
He does, but he's changed.
The experience of being Edward the adventurer has bled into Edward the clerk. He tells Maud, I bought the car, and we're getting married next month. He asserts dominance.
And Maud loves it. She's thrilled that he's finally taking charge.
It's a bit of a dated dynamic, certainly, the idea that a woman just wants to be mastered. But in the context of the story, the car is a talisman. It unlocked a version of Edward that was repressed by his economic station. It allowed him to find his agency.
And we see a similar theme in A Fruitful Sunday, right?
Yeah.
But it's a bit more melancholic.
Yes, the scale is much more modest. Dorothy and Edward Palgrave, Christie, love the name Edward for these types of guys. They buy a cheap fourth-hand Austin.
Christie loves her Austins.
She does. They drive out to the country, and their joy is so simple. Just the act of moving, of leaving the grime of the city. But they're constantly contrasting themselves with the rich. They see the Rolls Royces and the pearls passing them by, and they feel their own smallness.
Until they stop at a roadside stand, buy a basket of fruit, and find a ruby necklace inside the basket.
For a moment, they face a moral dilemma. Keep it and be rich. Or return it. They return it, of course, and it turns out to be a fake anyway, just a prop.
Right.
But the experience of having it, of holding that potential wealth, it changes their afternoon.
Right.
It highlights how the working class in these stories is constantly brushing up against the fantasy of wealth, but it's always just out of reach.
Okay, we've had romance, we've had adventure, we've had cars. Now we need to go back to the darkness. We need to talk about accident.
Accident is, in my opinion, the crown jewel of this collection, if you like your crime cold. It is a masterpiece of economy and tension.
So we have ex-Inspector Evans. He's a man who prides himself on his memory. He never forgets a face. He's retired to a quiet village, and he spots his neighbor, Mrs. Meridine.
And he recognizes her instantly. She is Mrs. Anthony. 9 years ago, she was tried for poisoning her husband with arsenic. She was acquitted due to lack of evidence, but Evans is absolutely convinced she was guilty.
He thinks she got away with it. And now he sees her with a new husband, a gentle professor, and he starts digging.
He finds out the professor has insured his life for a significant sum.
The classic motive.
The classic motive.
Yeah.
So Evans watches like a hawk. He sees the professor in his lab using chlorates weed killer chemicals that can be dangerous. And he sees Mrs. Meridine bringing tea to the lab in bowls.
Evans decides he's going to be the hero. He's going to stop the crime before it happens. He gets himself invited to tea.
This scene is electric. It's a duel of wits, but only one person knows the rules. Or thinks he does. Evans believes Mrs. Meridine is going to poison the professor that very afternoon using a poisoned tea bowl.
So he pulls a power move. She puts the bowls down. Evans deliberately challenges her. He switches the bowl she placed for him with the one she placed for herself. He's trying to force her hand.
Right. The specifics of the switch are key. He thinks one cup is poisoned, probably the one for her husband. He's trying to disrupt her plan. He essentially forces a switch. He looks her in the eye and says, I want to see you drink this.
He's cornering her. He's saying, if this is poisoned, you die. If it's not, drink it and prove your innocence.
Exactly. He thinks he has her checkmated.
And she pauses. She looks at him with this strange expression. And then she pours the tea he handed her into a flower pot.
Evans takes this as a confession. He thinks, aha, she didn't drink it. That proves it was poisoned. He feels triumphant. He has saved the day.
So he picks up his own tea, the one he believes is safe because he manipulated the switch, and he drinks it. He even says, to your long life.
And then he dies.
Convulsing in the chair.
Because the poison wasn't in the cup intended for the husband.
Wait, unpack that. Why would she? It was in the cup intended for herself.
Yes. Why would she poison her own cup?
Because she knew Evans recognized her. She knew he was a former policeman. She anticipated his psychology. She knew that if he came to tea, he would suspect her.
She knew he wouldn't trust her.
She knew that a suspicious detective would never drink the cup given to him. He would insist on switching cups to test her.
That is diabolical. She used his own suspicion as the murder weapon.
Exactly. She set a trap that only a suspicious detective would fall into. If he had been a normal, polite guest, he would have drunk the tea offered to him, which was perfectly safe, and she would have had to spill hers or fake an accident or something.
But she gambled on his arrogance.
She gambled that he would try to outsmart her. And he did.
And the final image, Mrs. Merodine smiling over his dead body and calling out to her husband, "George, there's been a dreadful accident."
It completely subverts the genre. Usually, the detective enters, solves the puzzle, and catches the criminal. Here, the criminal outsmarts the detective by using his own detective instincts against him. It is a perfect crime.
It leaves you with such a weird feeling. Because Evans, in a way, caused his own death by trying to play God. If he had just stayed home and minded his own business, he'd be alive.
And Mrs. Merodine gets to live happily ever after with the professor. It's a very cynical ending for Christie. It suggests that sometimes the bad guys win just because they are smarter.
So, looking at this whole collection, from the benevolent Lord Listerdale to the terrifying Mrs. Merodine, what does this tell us?
I think it shows us that Christie saw ordinary life as a very thin veneer. Scratch the surface of a boring boarding house and you find a lord in disguise.
Scratch the surface of a quiet marriage and you find a murderer.
And it's always the ordinary people who are the most dangerous or the most resilient. Alex Martin, a typist, defeats a serial killer.
Mrs. Merodine, a quiet housewife, outwits a seasoned police inspector. Edward Robinson, a meek clerk, finds his inner He-Man.
It's a reminder not to underestimate your neighbors. We all wear masks. Sometimes the mask is butler, sometimes it's devoted wife, sometimes it's Grand Duchess.
Here's a provocative question to leave you with. In Accident, Evans dies because he assumes he knows the truth. In Philomel Cottage, Alex survives because she invents a lie. Is Christie telling us that in this world, truth is actually a liability? And the ability to spin a good story is the ultimate survival skill.
That is a fascinating thought. Perhaps the best liar wins.
Something to mull over the next time you have tea with the neighbors. Just maybe watch which cup you drink from.
Indeed. Check your cups, lock your drawers, and maybe don't get into any strange cars. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.